Now,
on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's the 8 o'clock hour, and we are fired up and rolling straight through hour number 4 here as we hand it off to Chris Plant. If you missed any of today's show, please subscribe to our Downcast. Our podcast. Thank you. It's not downcast at all. In fact, it's quite upbeat. Subscribe to our podcast and download it. See, I was getting ahead of myself there. So you don't miss any of our scintillating 4 hours. Coming up in 30 minutes, it's Brent Bozell, MRC, about that hearing we saw with Zuckerberg and TikTok, etc. I'm Larry O'Connor. Yeah. That's Patrice Onwuka.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Patrice. On Friday, or a week ago, really a week ago right now, we saw this showdown developing at the Texas border where Governor Abbott has said, listen, the Supreme Court can decide that we can't stop the feds from cutting razor wire, but we're just going to keep adding razor wire. The Supreme Court didn't say we couldn't do that. And the Biden administration started threatening them, giving them a deadline to get out of there and stop protecting the border because they wanted to have the border open. 25 states all signed up and said, we stand with Texas and we will join them in protecting the southern border, and more importantly, the right of a state to protect themselves from invasion. Well, joining us right now is the Attorney General for one of those states, Utah. He is Sean Reyes, and he joins us now. I hope is it Reyes?
Reyes, yes, sir.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. So from your perspective as the Attorney General representing the people of Utah, tell me what your interest is in this showdown in Texas and also what the status is, because this sort of disappeared over the weekend. We had the deadline, we had a lot of tough talk from Joe Biden, and then nothing.
Sure. Well, great to be on with you, Larry and Patrice. Thank you for having me on the show. Just a little bit of an addition. There were 25 governors who originally supported states, and then we as AGs sent a subsequent letter to clarify what you just articulated, that the Supreme Court did not ban Texas from protecting itself. It only lifted the injunction, at least temporarily, against the federal government for cutting razor wire. So, we wanted to clarify there was a lot of misinformation that was.
Oh, yeah, all the headlines. In fact, the misinformation came from Biden himself, where he said they're defying the Supreme Court order. No, they were completely in compliance with the Supreme Court order.
So we had 26 AGs. I led, along with the great AG from Iowa, Brenna Byrd, this coalition, and also the legislature of Arizona. So 27 states in a letter that we sent. Because our interest, that was your question, why would we care about this? Because the criminal element that's coming through, whether that be human trafficking, billions of doses of lethal fentanyl coming across the borders, whether it's organized retail crime coming across, that all doesn't stop at the border in Texas. So as I've said many times before, given the failed border policies of this administration, every state is now a border state, and it may be only hours, sometimes days, before this torrent of criminal activity matriculates all the way throughout our state. So one, we wanted to support Texas. We wanted to clarify that they do have a right to defend themselves. And then also, selfishly, we wanted to protect our own citizens in our own states by sending this letter and supporting Greg Abbott, former AG, and our current AG colleague, Ken Paxton.
Well, there's nothing wrong with being selfish for your state, because I'm sure the citizens, appreciate the fact that someone is looking out for public safety in the state. Someone is looking out for public resources and public services. I'm just looking at your letter here, and you cite more than 6 million undocumented individuals coming through the southern border, which is roughly the population of Iowa and Utah, your state combined. Tell us about what you're hearing from your citizens. I am pretty sure there are a lot of people who are very irate at what's going on in the southern border and are looking for real leadership.
Absolutely, Patrice. Well, as I mentioned again, billions of lethal doses. That's just what we've confiscated at the border of fentanyl. And we know with the opioid epidemic and how it's ravaged our respective states. Billions of dollars of human trafficking coming through, whether that's labor trafficking, sex trafficking, organ harvesting, or other horrendous variations of that. Organized retail crime in the billions, but that's just the beginning. Then we're talking about national safety and security, right? I think the number was 169 individuals arrested last year, or at least in a one-year period from the fall of 2022 to 2023. 169 who are on the U.S. terror watch list. At least their names match those. So vulnerability, you have cartels cooperating, you have terrorist organizations exploiting no resistance at the border, and then on top of all of that, a humanitarian crisis, which includes 85,000 missing children at the border somehow. These were all in the custody of HHS at some point. Now DHS and HHS cannot find where they are. They can't locate them, at least or are not willing to disclose where they are. So all of these things coming together, Texas, absolutely, under our Constitution, Article 4, Section 4, Clause 2, the U.S. government must defend. That's their responsibility, and when it's abdicated, then Article 1, Section 10 comes into play, and Texas can defend itself from an invasion or imminent danger.
Yeah. Well, and that's where I want to pick it up, Mr. Attorney General. We're speaking with Sean Reyes. He's the Attorney General for Utah, where we're talking about the current status of this showdown over the Constitution, states' rights, and the ability of a state to protect themselves against invasion if the federal government refuses to do so. That really is what this is all about, and that's the crux of it. And I guess, as we saw in a hearing conducted by Chip Roy of Texas in the House earlier this week, the question is really going to boil down to what an invasion is, right? Because there's no doubt that there's millions, literally millions of people crossing that border into Texas, and the federal government is not stopping it. But is that, in fact, the definition of invasion?
We believe so. And there's historical analog for this, Larry. One example, James Madison referred specifically to the Commonwealth of Virginia's right to defend itself under these very clauses of the Constitution from, at the time, they were smugglers and pirates and so forth. And so from the very beginning of our nation's founding, that was what it was intended by the founders, that states could defend themselves, again, if the federal government abdicates its role and responsibility.
All right, and that's so. I would agree with you. I think anybody would agree with you. In fact, if you look at the Oxford definition of invasion, only one of them involves utilizing an army or armed forces.
Right.
Other definitions is one group of people entering another space without permission. It's literally what this is. Two questions. The first one, the most important one. What's going to happen here? Because, like I said, there was a 24-hour deadline, nothing happened, and now there's a standoff.
Well, a couple of things. I think President Biden is now realizing how unpopular this decision is, not only because it's horrible policy, but politically he's starting to realize, well, this is going to have ramifications in the election. And so trying to broker some deal with the Senate. So there, a lot of bluster, but now and again, they're going to pivot and try to blame Republicans for being obstructionist and not getting things done. On the legal side, it's at the Fifth Circuit level, and I think they've remanded back to the district court for some further findings of fact. So it's going to work its way back up, and all of us will continue to support Texas for their legal right to defend themselves and protect America in the process.
And finally, I would love for you to comment quickly in just our final minute here about this. Really, it's such a tricky little maniacal jujitsu you see on television, cable news, all these legal analysts, where when the issue of border security comes up and the federal government's responsibility to secure the border is challenged, and whether states have a right in there, and then the liberals do this every time, sir. They say, well, wait a minute, the federal government has sole responsibility of immigration. It's like, well, we weren't talking about immigration. We're talking about securing the border, and they keep trying to marry the two. Have you noticed that?
They conflate it all the time. It's a beautiful deflection. You said it well. I was a practitioner of jiu-jitsu. It's disingenuous, Larry. It's disingenuous, but it's effective because the average person doesn't understand that. They go, oh, no, okay, well, maybe they're right. It's a federal. Yes, under immigration, that's established. This is an entirely separate. They're related, but it's legally separate, and it should be analyzed separately. So you're spot on.
We got to keep an eye on that. By the way, hold on. You're Sean Reyes, by the way, Attorney General from Utah. Thank you for joining us. But you're a jiu-jitsu guy. The Attorney General of Virginia, Jason Miyares, I'm sure you work with him. He's a pretty fit guy. You think you could take him?
I love Jason. I'm not calling him out, but yeah, I trained MMA and jiu-jitsu for a number of years with some brilliant guys. I think maybe that's a great election reform.
Charity
Instead of
thing,
spending
maybe?
millions
Or
of dollars.
fundraiser.
Throw people in a steel cage and
Right?
it was fundraising.
Oh, I think we
or-
could raise some money for Fisher House, for families in the military. We get Jason Miyares in a cage, the Octagon, with Sean Reyes. Let's do this.
Again, I am not calling out Jason. I
It
love
sounds
him.
like
He
you
and his
are.
family. He is a great man and a terrific leader. But if it was for the right cause, I think he and I could agree we could get in the cage and do something to help raise
We
money.
can make it Joe
All right.
Rogan. I've always wanted to be
As long
Joe
as we're there
Rogan.
as long as you get to be the
Oh,
one
I'm
on,
ringside.
on
Oh,
the
absolutely.
platform.
This is
Exactly.
my Joe Rogan
Calling
moment.
the plays.
All right, Mr. Reyes, thanks for joining
Thank
us,
you,
and
sir.
we will be speaking with
Thank
Attorney
you,
General
Larry.
Miyares, I think, next week. So we will raise this with him. Thank you, sir.
Oh, boy. I'm looking forward to see how that gets spun. All right.
It's 8:17. Let's get straight to JB Witten now in the Hadid Carpet Cleaning Traffic Center.